Hello and welcome to the Literature Therapy. So far, we've talked about what bibliotherapy is. Now, the slightly uncomfortable question: how do you actually use it? Because at some point, ideas need to become practice. Otherwise, they just become something you nod at and forget while closing another tab. Bibliotherapy sounds more complicated than it is. Partly because it has a formal name, partly because anything involving books and psychology tends to collect unnecessary seriousness. But in practice, it's very ordinary, almost stubbornly so. It usually starts with a feeling, not a theory, not a framework, a feeling. You're anxious and slightly unfocused, or emotionally tired in a way you can't quite put a word to, or overwhelmed but still functioning, or just flat. Not dramatic, just off. That's usually where bibliotherapy begins. Step 1 is not read more. Step 1 is noticing, accepting. Noticing what is actually happening inside you. Most people skip this step. Understandably, we are not encouraged to spend time observing our internal states unless they become inconvenient enough to interrupt daily life. So instead, we jump to solutions. But bibliotherapy starts earlier with attention. You ask a very simple question: what am I actually feeling right now? Not what should I be feeling? Not what can I justify? What is actually here? Sometimes the answer is clear, sometimes it isn't. Both are fine. Once you have even a rough sense of that, the second step begins. Find a book that understands that feeling. Not a book that fixes it, not a book that optimizes it, a book that recognizes it. This is where people usually overcomplicate things. They start looking for the perfect book, the correct book, the intellectually appropriate book. You don't need that. You need a book that can stay with the emotion you are in. If you're exhausted, something slow. If you're anxious, something steady. If you're emotionally numb, something gently descriptive rather than intense. If you're grieving, something that doesn't rush. If you're confused, something that is also slightly unsure of itself. Books are not interchangeable. They carry different emotional temperatures, and most readers already know this instinctively. You just usually ignore it in favor of, I should read this because it's important. Step 3 is simple. Read slowly, which sounds almost insulting to say, but most people don't actually read slowly anymore. They skim, they multitask, they read while thinking about everything else they need to do. Bibliotherapy requires something slightly different. Not perfect attention, just enough presence to stay in the same place as the words. Even if only for a few minutes at a time. You can lose focus, you can reread paragraphs, you can stop halfway through one page and come back later. That's still reading. But be present. Now step 4. Write one page afterwards. This is not something that every bibliotherapist might ask, but I prefer it this way. Just write one page afterwards. Not an essay, not an analysis, not something you would show anyone. Just one page of whatever is left in your mind after reading. Sometimes it will be about the book, sometimes it will not. Sometimes it will look like nonsense. That's fine too. What matters is the movement from receiving language to producing language. From recognition to articulation, from inside a text to inside yourself, and step 5 is the one people underestimate. Repeat. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Not intensively, not obsessively, just again, another day, another page, another book if needed. Bibliotherapy is not a dramatic intervention, it is a practice. And practices only work when they are small enough to return to without negotiation. There is a tendency, especially online, to turn everything into transformation. But most meaningful changes are not transformations, they are repetitions. A page, a book, a page. A thought you return to more than once. One of the quiet truths about reading is that it does not need to be impressive to be useful. You don't need to finish everything you start. You don't need to read the right books. You don't need to become a better person through literature. That is not the job. The job is simpler. To pay attention to your inner life in a way that is not purely reactive. To notice what certain words do to you. To let language sit beside experience instead of constantly trying to outrun it. That's really it. Bibliotherapy is not a technique for fixing yourself. It is a way of staying in contact with yourself through books, and sometimes through the small act of writing after them. Nothing more complicated than that. If you try it, don't try to do it perfectly. That would defeat the point. Start small, stay honest, see what happens, and come back and tell me. I'll read all the comments.